Okay, so among the hundreds of, if not thousands of different Supreme Court cases that are dealing with actually land use issues, particularly the section of takings, as in physical invasion or diminishing economic means of a property, I want to point out like three, actually four, total classics. Or as I call them, the usual suspects in Supreme Court cases. First one is the case Nolan versus the California Coastal Commission. And give you guys a little bit a summary. This case involved the practice or term exception of requiring developers to help to pay for or dedicate land for public facilities as part of their development effort. Something we now would consider, hey, what about impact fees or development fees? Something what we also could say in layman's terms, you create this street, it's technically a private street, but the moment all the development is done, the maintenance and the right of the street is actually granted to the local community. So the local community did not pay for building that street, but the local community now will pay for trash pickup being served there, will pick up the cleaning of the street, or if you're not in Florida, for snow blowing. Now, personal own experience, worked for a town that had incorporated and unincorporated lands surrounding, had lands look really forcing like a fist into the closed hand from the different municipality, and you had state-owned routes within that city passing through. So technically, the snowplow would have to open up, lift up the blade in front of certain properties and drop it a few yards later again, because technically that property was not yet part of the annexation efforts of that city. A good snowblower doesn't care, just runs over. But technically it was a different service function for a different government section. As in, that landowner did not pay property taxes for that municipality. So that can happen. But Nolan, a developer, wanted to build a beachfront home, and the California Coastal Commission wanted an easement for public beach access in exchange for issuing Nolan a building permit to replace an existing house. We'll come to easement in a moment. But let's say, if you give me an easement, you grant me certain rights to access or utilize your property. Could be an electric easement, as in Florida Power and Light, and you put a box on your property. The reason why you give me an easement to put that transformer box on your property is so I don't physically invade your property. I will pay you for the use of that land. So there's compensation in place at certain amounts, in certain cases. So they basically said here, well, if you take down that house, and you want public access to the beach, which is kind of interesting because you guys said the beach is a public good. This is about the access to the public beach, or to the beach. You also can see here on the diagram there's a high tide property line. And the Coastal Commission had something to say about that. You have an idea where this is going? Yes? The Supreme Court struck down the exception, that special exception deal, stating that the Commission did not show an essential connection between the need for beach access and the denial of the permit. Remember, this was not about giving public beach access. This was, oh, we only give you the building permit to develop this land if you give the public access. There was a condition. Oh, we're only going to the playground tonight if you eat your plate. That's for those with kids in the room or family. Or you're not going out and play with your friends from high school until you're done with homework. Similar system. Okay, so as a result, this is the important part. So that exchange or the exception is one element, but as a result, the court created a new standard, the so-called Nexus Requirement. This requirement states that if there's any exception occur, like an exchange, they must be in response to the specific burden imposed by the development. So I can't just make this up. I give you the building permit, and therefore you're delivering to the local school 30 pounds of chocolate cake. Versus beach access. Has to be related to the development, has to have a necessity and public needs. Now we come to that public needs and necessity in a moment. So, also important is a specific burden by this development. So actually Nolan won this case. The conditions need to be directly related to the conditions of that exception. For that exchange of trade-offs. If you do this, we can do that. The example I did with the private street being transferred over to a public street is a special condition for that. Okay? So now here's the other element here. The easement does not prevent degradation of the viewscape, so it's not. So it is a taking, but they ruled against him in the large, against commission in the larger picture. Is access, public access to the beach, a public good?
Not by this case, no.
Let's keep that open. I do agree with your group over there. Beaches are public, a form of public good. I do agree with that. Is the access public good?
Not necessarily. This has been a debate, specifically in the country that I come from, where they.
Where are you originally from?
Barbados.
Barbados.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's been a lot of tourism has become one of our main industry there.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had in the past decade or so a lot of hotels that have built there, like Sandals, Almond Bay,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. So there's been a debate recently about, more of an issue with the hotels and the resorts privatizing access to the beach, like portions of the beach. So that's that's been a debate considering that public
Privatizing a beach in this case means increased enforcement of the private property rights, and basically arguing that the public does not have access to private property. Which brings us later back to HB 631 in 2018. Not the 2019 version, that's about retirement funding. Yeah? But last year was interesting. All right, let's go through this because it's beach related. Yeah? So, taking away from Nolan, no, I cannot make with you a special deal that is not related. I still can make special deals with you, but they have to be related. And how I test for this? It has to have this Nexus requirement. Nexus as in N-E-X-U-S. I think it's the same spelling like the shooting range down the street. No? Mm-hmm. Everyone's like, yeah. Molly was like, yeah. Alright. Next case, Lucas versus South Carolina Coastal Council. Yeah? Interesting case, original picture. Yeah? Vacant Lucas, house, vacant Lucas. Yeah? So So this guy wanted to build here as well. Let's read the synopsis. Lucas versus South Carolina Coastal Council. In 1992, and then probably I'm the only one in the room standing, yeah, the court adopted a new categorical rule for cases of total deprivation of all economic viable use. Remember, we're testing here all the time for the economic means of a property. Yeah? That adds yet more mysteries to the jurisprudence of the taking clause. Again, remember, takings, it's evolution over constitutional-based law. Huh? So we are talking about, we end this journey tonight on a case in 2005. Because I want to stop with one of the landmarks. I don't want to add additional material to it. There are different cases after that, but that was one of the landmarks. If not the landmark, like big capital letters. Yeah? We started with Euclid, 1926. It was argued it was a taking. And then struck down as like, no, it was just diminishing your values of the means of your property, but not all of it. Yeah? So we're talking here no more and more about all of it or partial. We have to differentiate then what is what. So the case involves a beachfront property that was purchased by Lucas 2 years before the adoption of new shoreline regulations by the South Carolina Coastal Council after several devastating hurricanes. We had timeline before in the case we reviewed today. The header check brickyard case, where they sold out and over time they made changes to the health system and said we don't want to have burning bricks in our manufacturing area. So, it goes back to that case. The shoreline requirement, you can see this here on the side, boundary of critical area under the old act, and then under 11 years later, the 77, and then the 88 Act. Yeah? He bought this property. Where is it? The case is in 92, so 4 years after this. Here we go. So he bought this 2 years before the adaptation, so he bought this in 86. Yeah? The shoreline requirement prohibited the owner from developing his property in any way. Nada, null, zero. Keep it as is because you are in that zone. They moved from here to here. Everything south of this 40-year erosion baseline is not developable land anymore. Yeah? Lucas filed suit claiming that the law constituted a taking of this property because the prohibition deprived him of all economical viable use. Yeah? All economic means of the property are gone. State court agreed, state trial agreed, state Supreme Court reversed, blah blah. The argument here was a serious public harm would exist if that would be developed. Yeah? And then at the end, pretty much said, well, it denies all economically beneficial or productive use of the land. The total denial of all use is a taking, even if the purpose of the regulation is to prevent harm rather than a public benefit.
So was he able to build?
Yeah. Yeah? One, again, was the physical invasion of the property, tested for that. And then second, the regulation denied all the economic use. And that's the two elements in this concept of the class we're testing for. Huh? So, a total denial of all use is a taking, even if the purpose of the regulation is to prevent harm rather than confer a public benefit. As in, let's take a look at the city of Hollywood, Dania, Vero Beach, and all these coastal areas. The Keys. if you put, depending on what you do now in terms of coastal protection and management, you have to make sure that you don't, with your regulations, don't deprive your property owners from potential economic means. So, remember I kind of said this like a riddle, Nolan, Dolan, Lucas. It was actually Nolan, Lucas, Dolan. Don't have to pick the real world picture on it. It's a little creek here. Little creek on this side. And the idea was it's a private property owned auto parts store to be demolished here on the same site, enlarged building. Yeah? From about 9.7 thousand square foot, pretty much double the whole thing, but put it on the back end, different setback regulations, different appeal from the curbside, different parking patterns. Yeah? So instead of, hey, park behind the property, why don't you park in front and you just walk into the store? Yeah? Different concept of retail. So this is interesting because the city of Tigard, argued Fenner Creek is beautiful, we would like to have a bicycle path, a trail behind the backyard. Yeah? And this goes back, this case is similar to the 1992 Nolan case with the exceptions. As in, you can develop, but you need to do this for me. Do me a favor, do this. So, the city of Tigard adopted a comprehensive plan. Remember, comprehensive plan, this is the vision and the outlook of the next 15 to 20 years, what we want to do with our community. That included the floodplain along Cedar Creek, near the Blaters property, to be clear of structures and preserve as open space to minimize flood damage. Makes sense. Widen them up, keep them open, don't block. Perfect, makes sense in an engineering context. Yeah? In addition, the plan suggested a pedestrian bicycle pathway to be constructed to provide an alternative mode of transportation in the area. You guys had a comment about sidewalks for safety. Yeah? It's a huge benefit for the public health and safety of a community if you actually have structured transportation for cycling and biking, walking and cycling. Yeah? Certain cities are making actually a marketing concept out of that. I used to live in the city of Boise. Along the Boise River, on both sides, most of the areas, beautiful bike path. Big trees, right at the river, pass through. Cycling, I used to live in an apartment which was 3 minutes cycling distance from campus. On a river, with dragonflies flying and all the crazy pedestrians that you run over. Yeah? But different natural resources, 150 some miles on trails, mountain bike trails and hiking trails in the backyard of that city, right into the foothills. It's like you would go to Fort Lauderdale Beach and instead of going into the water and diving on those reefs, you're actually about 1,000 feet higher in a few minutes hiking and biking. Beautiful landscape. Yeah? So the idea there, and the Boise example, is vibrant communities, healthy lifestyles. They even did the have you heard about New Belgium Brewery? For those who are of legal drinking age, New Belgium Brewery. They are famous for their so-called fat tire beer because it's a fat tire bicycle like a beach cruiser. That's the bicycles they use in their brewing company. Yeah? They're doing actually fun festivals in the Intermountain West and the West Coast called the Tour de Fête, where they invite, it's literally a big food and beer festival, but they also have an event where they actually have people showing up, like, what's the other, the big festival in the desert? No, what?
Burning Man?
Burning Man. Think about a mix between Burning Man on a bicycle and then the electronic carnival in Vegas and all that craziness. People are dressed up as fairies and costumes. Literally, I had students calculating the public health benefit from an event like this. If a few thousand people are driving just 5 miles 2 times in a circle on doing this festival through downtown, yeah? how many miles are produced and how many public dollar benefits you generate from it. There are actually calculations you can do. Yeah? So that aside, alternative modes of transportation are beneficial for your community. Believe it or not, we don't walk here anymore in Florida, we drive anywhere, and poorly drive. It's a thing. And you can see how excited I am today about all these little side notes. Yeah? So, the plaintiff, so Nolan, planned on expanding the existing business and applied for a permit. This is what we discussed here, moving from the right structure to the left proposed structure. The city issued a building permit with the condition that Nolan dedicates 10% of his property that was within the floodplain to the city. You can see this here, just here in that section. Donate your land. As in, you get the permit if you donate the land. Yeah? What we learned with Nolan, can't do that. What was the outcome from Nolan? The Nexus Requirement. So the court stated that a nexus existed between the furthering of the public interest and the permit condition on the property in question. It was in this case obvious that a nexus existed between preventing flooding along the creek and limiting development in the creek's floodplain. That's one thing. Again, this is, okay, public good, public interest, makes sense. The city failed, however, to show how the impact of the business were related in a rough proportion for the need of public access on a bicycle path. As in, yes, you're right, the floodplain protection is part of the nexus, and yes, you're okay with that. But how dare you are using this for a bicycle path? It's a non-related use as a condition to the building permit. Remember, it has to be related if I want to do that. Yeah? The public access, therefore, this is the funny part. The public access, therefore, constituted an invasion, and there was no nexus established between the requirement and the impacts on the project. Right? And then we have a new legal term as a test, but we don't worry about that. Yeah? The important part is you can actually now argue that there are two elements in place. One is the floodplain issue. City lost that. Because there was a nexus given to test for between the need of the floodplain and the change in property. But for the bicycle, nope. We consider this the Nolan test. Or because you have to do with a roughly proportionate element. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Florida. So we learned right now, we had two examples that dealt with coastlines. Yeah? One example talked about beach access. The other one, the expansion of the interpretation of the erosion line to further public interest. And then we have this. So last year, February, March, I actually got a phone call from a friend of mine as in, hey, have you seen this? I think it was March. I'm like, no, I haven't. So there was actually a bill in Florida Senate, HB 631, 2018, that actually addressed the issue of how to argue public access on beaches versus the physical invasion, aka trespassing, of public people on private property. We have seen no trespassing private property signs hundreds of times. When did you see this on the beach? Up in Connecticut, we have a lot of them. All right. Well, Lily had this up here. You can see this has to be somewhere in April, May then. Yeah? In Franklin County as an example. Get off my beach lawn. They demonstrated that. Then you can see this. If you look at this, there's actually a web page on it, beachipedia.org, apparently. US beaches, what the public owns, as not owning it, but actually having access to it. Now you can see there are different ideas on how we deal with beach access and public access. Yeah? Mean low tide, mean high tide, or the entire beach. As in, depending how high the water is at a given season and an appropriate line of measurement, I have certain access. So this came then up with the idea, wait a minute, what's the mean high tide? What's the low tide? Does this mean it's the wet sand? Or is it some sections in between the wet sand or dry sand? Yeah? Depending on what tide you have, the sand might be less wet than this one. Yeah? Went downhill so far that you actually can find video of law enforcement and also code enforcement, both parts, literally arguing with people at the beach. Where is that line to be drawn where to sit? And then also the dunes, you access here somewhere from, and where is this private property going through? Everyone in the room right now is like, duh, what is he talking about? This is a huge, interesting problem. Huh? Not just for you as human beings, because then we had this one going on. There was literally phone calls made to local government. Yeah? Sea turtles trespassed into private property. Huh? And I present this in a very humorous way here. Bel Air Shore, Florida. Huh? The whole idea also came up, I think for Vero Beach was very huge with that private property discussion. Yeah? Now, again, I want to present this as in the 19-something case of a Lucas, yeah? Or a Nolan and Dolan. This was last year. Think about this. You mentioned this for Barbados. South Beach. Every hotel that pretty much goes on the property line onto the beach now could use this. This was ratified and written into law last year on the 1st of July. Now you can say, until this end here, depending on interpretation, I can block this up, put a sign on it, put my sun chest behind it, and you're trespassing into the hotel. Hotel's private property. Huh? The huge discussion here was also the public good of beaches in Florida is maintained by whom? Communities and the state of Florida, depending where you're at. If they clean up the beach, who's paying for that? You. Not enough, but you. Somehow you pay for it. Property taxes, local taxes. I'm a big fan of the idea that it's get deposit for cans and bonds. So next time when spring break occurs, as in February till May, you guys started collecting your bonds, even those. Put 5 cents on it. And it won't be trash anymore. They are valuable resupplies. Which is mind-blowing for, again, anecdotal, someone from a different continent, different culture, different generation, obviously, with the gray hair. When we did studies abroad and did barbecues in the public park, there was 0 beer or other beverage cans available at the end. If we didn't pick it up to get deposit back, homeless would pick it up. It's illegal to give a homeless an empty bag, give them the stuff, but they would pick it up. They would even go and pick it up out of the trash. A huge reduction in the trash flow into the final waste. Yeah? Imagine that you would be on spring break and the six-pack you carry, by the way, none of you guys class on the beach. After this speech here, no more class on the beach because a ton of people will step into that and get hurt. Even the aluminum can. Take your trash with you. I collect trash beer cans underwater because people are boating and throwing this overboard. It's not worth it. All right, this is for the environmental speech. But again, very bizarre. After the few Supreme Court cases you heard tonight, and some of them are covered in the readings, this is the most recent interpretation for what's in your backyard. And this is just absurd, if I may say so. A sea turtle has absolutely no idea who owns that property. Sea turtle just picks that property out for a nest. So, particularly for folks in Florida, I think this is important to recognize that. All right, what's next? Ooh. You ready for it?
Yeah.
What's eminent domain? Almost. Repeat it, but louder, please.
I know that it's for compensation, but it's like you're like infringing on your property or taking certain property.
Okay.
Compensation to the government.
All right. Any other ideas? You guys, any other ideas? What is eminent domain? So she was right. It has to do something about process. One involved party is the government. Who's the other involved party?
Property owner.
Private property. In a classic case, it's private property. So, there are different ways to deal with eminent domain. If I have zero idea about it, I go to a dictionary. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines eminent domain as a right of a government to take private property for public use by virtue of the superior dominion of the sovereign power over all lands within its jurisdiction. That's big, big words. We did a revision today from last week, and we did have that repetitive today. What does this say? Based on?
Basically just the government's right to take private property for public use.
Yep. And the justification is in the two constitutional principles. Constitutional principles by number 14, and this is 5. Eminent domain. It's a little mistaken because 14 is the first one in PowerPoint, 5 is the one. Yeah? Superior dominion of sovereign powers is the policing powers to soul and police. Yeah? All right. Well, then we have other functions, other definition. I call it a relative definition because I try to put this in other terms instead of going through big law-based cases. Yeah? I found different other definitions. And put a reference on there so they won't be angry with me. Eminent domain as well, again, now this is important here. This one now argues it's a process. Yeah? It's a government's process of taking private property for public use. Yes?
What was the difference between, I may be jumping the gun, but this and escheat? Escheat, I think it's like when the government can take property if it wasn't left to anyone in their will, something like that.
Or in terms of planning law,
I just know it was one of the ways of taking.
I don't know where is that grounded. But let's say it like this. One reason to execute eminent domain, therefore to to execute this process for public use would be if there is no rightful owner of private property anymore available. Yeah? Bloodline completely gone. No one is there anymore to cultivate and maintain that use. What would happen with that property?
That's what I just looked at. I guess that is a
It will deteriorate. Yeah? So if this is a building, it will deteriorate to a certain extent and it will fall apart. If this is regular lands, it might start growing and growing and growing, and whatever else will be filled up on that. It might turn into like a wild land dump, where people litter or drop their garbage on it. Yeah? So, under the constitutional principle of government in your jurisdiction, that's the other slide before, I do have the right for what? Health, safety, and welfare. So if you have a home that completely starts falling apart, maybe even pest infested, might even be a fire hazard, at some point I could present the argument for health, safety, and welfare of my community. I have to make certain steps.
So is that like the prospect of condemning a house?
Condemning a house, blight comes to mind if a whole neighborhood goes downhill. Yeah, at some point the whole neighborhood is boarded up. At some point you would argue, well, it's blighted. Yeah? Therefore, blight. You want me to write this down, blight? Huh? Therefore, you argue it's so deteriorated that the economic means of this property are actually impacting other economic means of in the neighborhood. Think about this, the worst case scenario. Private property owner. You don't care about cutting your grass every Saturday afternoon. Depending on how finicky and particular your neighbors are, you might actually get a visit from the city telling you, your grass is this high, you need to cut it down. Huh? I had that in my personal life. I literally told my neighbors to the left and to the right, and the two that came across the street to say hi, hello, new person. I told them, in the next 6 weeks, I'm not going to cut my grass. And they looked at me, why can you do this? My neighbor literally walked over to my property and cut out dandelions. Yeah? And I said, in the next 6 weeks, I'm not doing this. There are more important things inside this house to get rehabbed and fixed than the grass. 5 weeks later, this was a pristine front yard. Yeah? But for the first 4 to 5 weeks, I literally told them, I don't even have a lawnmower yet. Will not do that. Just so that you know, I'm also having friends in the they say that, but they figured planning professor, planning department, they know each other. Yeah? But the lady with the dandelions, even after we reseeded the whole thing, she always came over. That's fantastic. Yeah?
Did she just not like your dandelions, or?
No, because dandelions are beautiful when they're yellow,
Yeah.
but they're impossible to control when they start blooming in the seed. And she was very particular. So, yeah, no. Fun fact, but okay, remote is here. I call it a relative definition because it's different from Merriam-Webster. It's actually from the law side, you know? But it's, again, here, the process of taking private property for public use. The critical point here is process, public use, as in a mix between public goods and public interest, yeah? Which we come back in a moment. Yeah? There also is a differentiation now here when we talk about takings, and I refer all the time to the economic means of private property. Do you have a complete taking? Complete gone. Remember we did this example with Paul's car, or was it Paul's laptop? Completely gone. Yeah? Is it a partial taking? Only a portion of the property is needed. You could argue that the Nolan case with the city of Tigard with the bicycle path and the floodplain was a partial taking. or struck down for other reasons, but they argued they would like to have 10% of the property dedicated for the floodplain. Yeah? Again, they got the floodplain was granted, not bicycle path. Yeah? So, or a temporary taking occurs if the property is needed only for a specific period of time. Example of an early case is the flooding. Well, the case of a flooding is it's more like based on the seasons and the weather and the climate versus every 1st of September I'm opening up the valve and have a flooding occur. Yeah? Which are actually in regions here in on the in the East Coast, you actually find regions where they actually do that. West Virginia, not the New River, but the Upper River, New River, Huntington area. It's great for rafting because they have a huge dam, and in the beginning of September they have the so-called dam release. So they're actually flooding on purpose, opening up the valves and releasing water. Therefore, everything else is downstream flooded, turns from whitewater rafting category 3 into 4s and 5s. That's international tourism attractions. Yeah? So, New River and can't remember. So that might be, you could argue, well, that would be a temporary taking because it's a scheduled event. Yeah? Questionable. Would have to double check with a land use lawyer if it says a specific period of time. If you have small scale thinking a NASCAR event in town and you repurpose public lands and therefore impacting private property as well, I'm not sure if that would count as a taking. But it's borderline because it's temporarily different use of your property. The city of Dover, Delaware, what they do in a specific period of time, they actually repurpose their land. Whatever land is available is going to be rented out for parking or RVs when NASCAR is in town. So it's like almost like 10, 15 years ago, today you would use it for Airbnb. So technically, zoning law, if you Airbnb your guest bedroom in your house, you're actually creating an economic commercial use in your house. It's an income revenue producing purpose versus your house, you're on a tax exemption because you're homestead. So I don't know exactly the tax law details on this, but an interesting thought. So if you're starting to rent out all four bedrooms you have in the house because the kids left, no? You're creating actually an apartment building almost in a residential zone. All right, but taking this away, the different types of takings we have to consider in the process of taking. Again, public use. And then we were going to take a look at just compensation or fair market value. Because I'm going to take your property away, currently valued for $250,000. That would be a just compensation. That is what I'm dealing with. Yeah? You're not going to ask for $1 million because you're the last piece of property available. There has to be a mediation on that. Typically goes through court.
Can you get more than what's originally?
That depends on the court. Yeah? We had a guest speaker. It's not an eminent domain case, but it's a land acquisition case. We had a guest speaker last year who was responsible for the Home Depot site on Sunrise, Oakland and Sunrise. And he told us that acquisition was fine. They moved the Burger King or McDonald's across the street, did all that. Part of land acquisitions are certain land swap deals, perfectly fine. But they had an issue or a challenge with a tenant with a lease for the next 5 or 10 years in an existing building. And one of the last things you want to do in the state of Florida is forcing a legally enforceable lease or tenant out. So property $40,000, $50,000 something worth, I think settled at the end for $700,000 as an sue me and deal with all of that. Just to make sure that the last piece, the center, literally was in the middle of the property, that is actually being dealt with. Land acquisition, if you talk about land use lawyers, remember I told you about land use lawyers? That's one of those land use lawyer stories, where you literally get 5 other lawyers involved just dealing with this little property. You have multiple acres, and that one little property in the middle can landlock everything. And need to check with him. I had him on the phone today. The guy who develops Dana Point is presenting in my grad class in a week. We're going to record that, so I'm inviting for sure to watch the recording. He's telling the whole story about all the land acquisition and the steps they did, the iterations. So I'm really excited. Just looking at plans and knowing when it went from 1 million to 3 million square foot now to 2.5 million, and all the players involved. Wow. All right, let's go back. Eminent domain. Yeah? The right of the government to take private property for public use with a controlled process. Yeah? You have to have necessity and public purpose. I can share that. Remind me. I can share that. A lot of writing. Yeah? The necessity is the test to determine the amount of property needed adequately to undertake the project. And a simple example here is, well, if you need 100 foot going through a property, don't take 250 or 300. Yeah? Don't be greedy, would be the relative definition on that one. Take what you need to get this job done, which is questionable if you say, I want to build a street, or I want to have a little bit space for a median or even for the shoulders, and you might be ending up in 150 feet. Yeah? Adequate, undertake, public purpose. The necessity here is you accept that there is a road to be built, but make it accordingly to the current standards and needs. Don't take land away in this example for an interstate if you need 100 foot for 2 lanes. 2 lanes and some. The other example here is part of the public use, is the public purpose. Is that taking justified with the government as it is established its power of eminent domain to acquire private property? That's one of the reasons why we went through the exercise of what is the public good. So to adapt to your example, yes, if it's empty land but not maintained in any form, not even protected with a fence, because there's no more legal owner available, no one claims that land, the city now could go in and say, for the welfare, health, and safety of our community, we will execute the process of eminent domain for the public purpose of, let's say, create a neighborhood park. Yeah? You might get in trouble if you say you want to take it away for a company that builds an office park on top of it. She's smiling. She does not know what comes next in the slides. It's going to be economic development. Yeah? Again, examples for this would be public purpose, roads, parks, schools, public buildings. Yeah? What you guys said here with the first definition. Purpose of the project serves a public good or need. So a water plant to clean your water or a pump station could be a public need. I make this extreme. If that piece of land would be perfect fit to actually change all adjacent properties from septic tank to a sanitary system with sewer piping, but you need a lift station that might smell a little bit, you would be able to do that. Because the public needs of public health to move the potentially fading septic tanks out of the area and attach you to a modern high-tech water treatment, yeah, would benefit from that, would support that. Again, if we are talking about eminent domain, I want you guys to keep in mind is that a necessity to it, as in keep it real. If I need this corner of your property, I won't take all of your property. And the public purpose. All of this is about the better benefits to the community. Yeah? With the idea that I will take private property away from you. However, remember the guy here, Pareto? Wipe it out. You should have no harm with this. I will compensate you for this. Let me pay you a little bit money and you're going to be fine that I put nuclear waste on your property. Yeah? And the community is all better off because all property taxes are being paid for by my company. This is an extreme example. But yeah, could do that. I could take the middle of the campus, take that lake, bulldoze it down, put a BIOS research center on top of that, and compensate everyone who wants to go swimming with free transportation to the beach. Not that you would like to swim in that beach, in that lake anyway, but we'll see. Just think about that. And then we have Kilo. So Molly was smiling about this example about economic development. Yeah. All right. This is a landmark in eminent domain cases. Yeah. So what I think, let me do this slide, the next slide, yeah. Let me do this slide to prepare you guys and we take a break. Yeah. And we'll show 3 short videos. They are as long as you get too tired for a break time. Yeah? So quick bathroom break, stretch out your legs, get a beverage if needed. So the idea here is I'm doing this with a mini video instead of me lecturing and giving you details. The short story here is local community, huge private interest for development, and the city played with the private interest of development. And some people in that community did not like that. And Susan Kilo is the case in front of the Supreme Court. Yeah? Take a 5-minute break. Let me come back with the story to be told about the little pink house, as they call it. And then we wrap up eminent domain with private property rights.